Welcome back to Mirrors Signal podcast. I'm your host, Josh Holleran, and today we are joined by
Craig Preedy.
Craig Preedy. Today's episode is going to be something a little bit different. We've made it to episode 52, which marks a year of the podcast. So I'd like to just thank everyone that has watched or listened to the episodes and has left comments, likes, shares, and subscribed to the channel. It's been a great experience, and there are many more episodes lined up. But this episode is going to be a little bit different. Myself and Craig have been working on a project for a little bit of time now. There are a few people that are aware, but they're not aware of what it's about. So we've decided that today, episode 52, is a good time to launch this new product. So, Craig, can I let you introduce what it is that we're going to be offering?
So well, how can I put it? I was listening to your podcast that you did with Terry Cook a while back, wasn't I? And I was quite intrigued by some of the things that you were saying. So I reached out to you and just asked what your thoughts and ideas would be if we were to do something around ADI Part 1. And I was pleased to hear that you had very similar thoughts and ideas to me. So we started to put our heads together and think, how can we help PDIs coming into the industry, knowing full well from the podcast that I did with you a couple of months back, that you knew that I was pretty passionate about this. And through our conversations that we'd had, I knew you were pretty passionate about it as well. But we were both seeing comments and questions on various Facebook groups, weren't we? And I think both of us were getting a little frustrated that nobody seemed to know where to go to get the answers and responses that they actually wanted. And it seems to me, and you probably as well, that the part one has become a little bit of you go away and do that yourself, and you come back to us when you're ready to do your part two and your part three. So people effectively were feeling a little isolated and a little confused, a little stumped sometimes about how to revise, how to pass the test, what was included in the test, where to go to get answers to certain things. So we put our heads together and we've decided that a course might be a good idea for these PDIs. A course that was designed to help and support, but not give the answers, but to facilitate, if you like, their learning. That's pretty much it in a nutshell, I think. Unless there's anything else that you can add at this point.
Nope, that's it. We're going to have my shortest episode. That'll do. I think we're at about 8 minutes. Job done. Tune in next week. Um, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is a lot going to be coming out. We've got the socials ready to go, and it is going to be an online course where absolutely, like you've said, we can help people through the part one and hopefully offer some support. But alongside it, there's going to be another podcast that will be run in line with the part one course that we're offering. But I think you're right what you said there about people are often either studying for the part one on their own, or they're given some publications, maybe a disc and an app to use, and then off you go, give us a shout when you've passed your part one. And I kind of thought that was the norm. And in all honesty, until I started this podcast, I'd not really thought about it. But the more people I talk to, especially when I spoke to you about our last episode and when we was having conversations around that, I felt like the part one test was a hurdle that I needed to get through to become qualified as a driving instructor. But on reflection, I think it's the foundation of a well-rounded driving instructor. I think if you've got the bulk of the knowledge, or you know how to find the answers, it's going to make you a much more confident driving instructor, especially coming up to your part two and your part three test. and then delivering a more complete package for your learners. So I'm excited about it, and I do think it will help people putting that time in at the part one stage to get through the next two stages. So I think it should be fun.
I think it will be fun. And I like the way that we've started to put these together as well, because we're not focusing on giving people the answers to everything, are we? What we've done is trawled the Facebook groups, if you like, and every time we've seen a question come up related to part one that somebody was struggling with, thought, oh, that's a good idea. We'll put that into the course, because if one or two people are asking the same question, then there's probably 300 or 400 people that are considering the same question. So we want to have a focus, if you like, on the various different sessions that we run on the things that people found the most trickiest. Now, there may be more, and this course will evolve over time. We've started it a bit like a bit like a starter for yeast. You know, the bread starters that you can make. We're starting to feed it a little bit at a time, but we want more information. And the more information we get from the people that attend or use our social media, then the more we can add to this course to make it even more relevant to the people that are attending it. We think it's pretty relevant now, but we can make it even more relevant once we get even more feedback. So it will evolve over time. But yeah, we're looking forward to it. I'm certainly looking forward to getting stuck in and helping some of these PDIs. I think it's going to be a good adventure.
Absolutely. And you're right, there's always going to be things added and areas that we can improve and grow and develop the product. But I found looking into this and doing the studying and coming up with some of the stuff. I mean, I'm not going to take much credit for the lessons that are going to be delivered or the PowerPoint or however we're going to word it really, because it's not us talking at you. It's going to be discussions and studying and being directed between Zoom sessions on how you can study and where you should be looking. And that's what I found interesting, getting the books back out again and going through them. The highway code, the driving, the essential skills, the driving instructor's handbook and practical teaching skills, going through all of those publications again and refreshing my knowledge. It gives you a deeper understanding of things. So absolutely, they can change the questions on the part one. But if you've done effective study and you've had people guiding you on where to study and what information is relevant right now, and maybe what information you just need to be able to go and find at a later date, I think that's hugely beneficial. The apps are great for you to learn the answer to a question. But if there's a question on a very similar topic that you've not come across on the apps, have you got the background knowledge to get those questions right? And I think that's where we're going to help. It's not a case of here's all the books, sit on a Zoom session, listen for 2 hours and hope that you can take some notes. It's going to be, let's discuss these topics. Let's get your information, what you already know, where we can help you develop, and then go away for the next week and have a look at these publications, this bit of information. So even though we're maybe directing people to a certain bit, they're going to find so much more information
Yeah,
when they're looking for that. So I do think it will give such a broader understanding of what the part one is and how it can help you later down the line.
absolutely. I think our emphasis is going to be on making it fun to learn. You know, the one thing that can be very tedious when you start the whole process of becoming a driving instructor, our minds are already focused on the qualifying part, and we see other driving instructors going around thinking, that'll be me one day. Look at that nice car that they're driving, and we want it for ourselves. But then we sit down with the books, and it's hard work. It's not easy. Um, and it doesn't need to be dull. It doesn't need to be boring. It just needs to have some focus. And we want to bring that focus to the guys that are out there that are struggling, but we want to make it fun. We're going to set some homework. We're going to give them little tasks that they can do between sessions. And it's not going to be too much. It's going to be things that can be managed around their current employment or around their family life so that they can just find little snippets of information, things, and bring that back to the session the following week so that they can share what they found with other people as well. And this learning will take place en masse. And we'll have these little evangelists going around saying, did you know? Because I learned this whilst I was looking for that. And that's what we want. We want people to be seeing the fun in the learning and not just seeing this as a hurdle, which is how you saw it when you first did your part one as well. I remember doing mine years ago, and I had an effective study guide, which really worked for me. I knew exactly where I was going to go with these books. And like most people, I got the books, I ordered them off Amazon or wherever it was at the time. And I sat down with the first one. I opened up the first page, and within about 6 or 7 pages, I was starting to yawn because I didn't really know if this was relevant at that time. So we want to make things relevant for people by directing them to where they need to be looking, but hopefully they'll pick up other stuff along the way as well. But yeah, the emphasis is definitely on fun. It's on interaction. It's not death by PowerPoint. We're using PowerPoint simply as a tool to help us, to prompt us, to help to prompt you as well, so that you understand and know what we're speaking about at any given time. And as I said, this is an ongoing process. These slides will change, the content will change, and we hope to answer as many questions as we can along the way. And we'll learn as much probably from our PDIs as they can learn from us too.
Absolutely. There's going to be a lot of learning because the people that are watching this or listening, you may have had a similar experience when you was doing your part one, whether that was you had someone give you the books or whether you got on the apps and practiced all of the tests. There's a lot of information, and trying to cipher through that on your own. There's, what is it, 5 different books on the DVSA's recommended reading list. And I don't know about you, have you tried reading them cover to cover and retaining all of that information that's in there?
I'd like to tell you that I have, but no, I haven't. I think the only one I have read cover to cover, to be honest, and I did it 3 or 4 times, was the Highway Code. It was really pressed home to me how important it was to understand the content of the Highway Code. And I said, but it's dull and boring. And they said, yes, but when a police officer stops you for something, you'll have the answer. That's the way that my trainer put it to me. And I thought, oh, good point. But I don't want to get stopped. But no, the Highway Code was the one that I probably have read from cover to cover. But I wouldn't say that I've done it for every incarnation since.
I mean, that's the easiest of the publications to get through. It's about a quarter of the size. And I think the other books, especially as I've been going through them again in preparation for this course, a lot of it now makes a little more sense. Now I've been doing the job for a couple of years and I can go back and I use it as a reference. I think the one I use most is Driving the Essential Skills, because I feel that gives us a much better understanding of things for me and my students on lessons. That one stays in the car with me. So when we get questions on roundabouts or different vehicles or whatever it is, that one has the answers. And with the podcast that we're going to be launching alongside the course, we do offer a little bit of guidance on what you can use each of the publications for and their purpose. So there is going to be information that we're putting out there that people can use to their advantage without having done a course with us. But I think having structure at the early stage should really help people gain an understanding of what the job is, because I didn't link the tests, the part one, the part two, the part three. I kind of treated them all as standalone. And I think what we have is going to be that solid foundation that will really help people understand what it is and why they're practicing what they are for the part two. and then understanding what's expected of them for the part three and doing the job. So I do think it's a challenge. There's a lot of content, but I think we can really help people put themselves in the best position to get through it.
Yeah, definitely. And the content, although there is a lot of content, I think people will be quite surprised at how much they actually know anyway. It's some of the technical stuff, maybe some of the stuff which is more very ADI specific. That's the bit where people sometimes struggle. But a lot of it is some general knowledge in there, and people could generally have a good stab at getting an answer out of something. But as you pointed out earlier on, it's all very well knowing the answer to a question and thinking, oh yeah, great, I got that right. But what about what goes on behind it? Why is the answer to the question the answer that it is? Is there anything else that I need to know that will add to the knowledge that I have about this specific thing? This has become quite apparent to me over the last couple of years when I've been teaching PDIs for their part three, and knowing that they've used a lot of apps in order to be able to prepare because that's what they've chosen. Yet we've come to the part three training, and I'm thinking, well, had you have been able to go through practical teaching skills, for example, and look at the section on lesson planning or look at the section on client-centered learning, then you would have had more knowledge about this specific thing instead of having to come back through it now, or even knowing that that book was there for you to use and not just relying on somebody to give you an answer. And you'll find that when you teach students as well, we're not just going to tell them what to do. We want them to look for the answers as well. So what we're hopefully going to be doing is to breed good practice. So these new PDIs coming through that sit down on our course, work with us, and we'll work with them, will develop the skills that they need, not only to have the knowledge, but to actually effectively become good coaches themselves, because they'll learn from the coaching that we will offer them. Does that make sense? Yeah, it does.
Yes, it does. And you're right with that. I think one of the main bands that I struggled with was around the teaching and learning strategies and the instructor specific stuff, because you're absolutely right. I had some great stabs at all of the, I guess, general questions that as experienced drivers we should know. I done well with them. It was the questions around instructor technique and different things where I struggled, and I only failed by 1 or 2 marks on my first two tests. And again, on reflection, I think it was those bands that would have let me down, because I knew about teaching because of my background, but I didn't know about it in this industry and some of the questions that they had, because I never was really taught all that much about my job. I kind of just learned on the job how to get the best out of people and didn't really know why it was working or how it was working. I just saw the results and I'm like, right, this is working. Let's keep doing this. Or this didn't work for this person, so we'll try something different. And I felt I could bring that into this industry. But the part one, I think you need to understand why you're doing it. The client-centered, why is it effective? Why do we use different teaching techniques? And how are people going to best learn? Along with that, structuring a lesson. That's our job. We need to be able to figure that out, because that's what we're going to be doing on our own in the car with a learner. And all of that can be covered at the part one stage, in theory, at least, and then you put it into practice later down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And people will know where to refer back to as well when they get to the part three stage, because they'll remember their part one study and they'll think, oh, I saw that in such and such a book. And they'll be able to go straight back to that book, and that will help them with their lesson plans for the following day. Or if they're experiencing some difficulties with a particular student, then they'll be able to maybe utilize some of the knowledge that's in those books. But more importantly, they'll be able to utilize the socials as well that we'll have, because we're going to be there to support them through that. But bearing in mind, we are not about just giving an answer directly. We're going to be about allowing you the opportunity to go and find the answer but we will help to direct you to where to go. Because that's the most important aspect of learning, which you'll find in part three anyway, that you've got to help the person themselves find the solution to the problem, because then they are more likely to remember it. That's the way that I was taught. That's the way that we teach our part three. That's the way that we teach our learners. It's all very well saying, what does that sign mean? Okay, what, and then following it up with a question like, well, why do you think they've put that sign here? Then you start to develop a little bit more understanding. So what are you going to be looking for now you've seen that sign? And now you understand why it's here. What are you looking for? Instead of just saying, what does that sign mean? And we want to do the same with these questions. It's all very well asking a question. For example, one that you've used a few times is, what is rote learning? Well, you could tell people what rote learning is, but then when are you going to use it? Why is it beneficial? When can you use it? When should you not use it? Is there a time when you should? Is there a time when you shouldn't? So part and parcel of the course that we will offer is covering things such as that, rote learning, GDE matrix, you name it, it's going to be in there. All those things that you were afraid to ask, but we're happy to answer the questions and more.
Absolutely. And the additional knowledge that gets gleaned when you do go through the publications yourself, like you said, figuring out rote learning. I used Google in the end because I didn't know which publication to find it in or how to find it. But if I was looking through them now to find it, the additional information that I would get from that is only a good thing because you're going to pick up little bits. And then the more you understand it, the more you want to learn. So I think it sets you off on the right footing coming into the industry.
Yeah, it does. And you say you're using Google. I mean, there's nothing wrong with using Google to find the answers to things if that's your preferred way of learning when things come up, because it's not always going to be in the book. And in fact, I think that's a mistake that people make as well. I think both you and I have seen a number of times, haven't we, where people have said, I just did my part one and failed because there were questions in their part one that didn't come up on the apps. That's a statement that they made, and that's the reason they think that they failed. And the answers are potentially within the books, but there's also going to be things that will be on Google or even in Wikipedia, heaven forbid. But there is surprising amount of information that can be found from many different resources, places like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. There's all sorts of places, but it's understanding what's real and what's fake. And that's the important thing. And we can help with that as well, hopefully. That's our plan.
Definitely. And I had a thought then when you was talking. I suppose it's a little bit like if I had a student that, and when I first started, I just gave them a copy of the highway code. I was like, read that, do some mock tests, you'll be okay. Whereas now I've got a better understanding, and it's primarily through the podcast and talking to great people like yourself that it's changed my view on it. And I think now if a student was to come to me and be like, I failed my theory test, I'm like, well, what preparation did you do? I done a load of mock tests and there was questions that came up that I'd not seen before. I'd likely look to have, well, I'd have a conversation with them. Right, well, let's look at the areas that you struggled with and why. And then we get the highway code out and we go through there. We get know your traffic signs out. We go through the signs, and it's not just, oh, when you get asked this question, this is the answer. It's, well, like you've mentioned, why is it the answer? What does it mean? What are they actually asking? And that's how I help my students with their theory test. And that's what we're going to be doing for people with their part one test. It's going to be, well, let's help develop what you know and give you that support. Because yes, for some people, using an app will get you through your part one, but does it give you the full understanding of the information to become a driving instructor? Or is that maybe why some people are struggling at the part three stage? potentially a lack of knowledge around maybe client-centered learning or structuring a lesson. If we've not studied how to structure a lesson, then where do we get that information from? Would it be
More
much better
important, what
getting it at
happens when
part
they
one?
get to their first lesson as well? If they don't know how to structure a lesson, when they come into their part three, they're going to struggle because one of the things their trainer is going to ask them to do is to deliver a lesson on use of mirrors, for example. Well, where does the structure start? Where do you start with that? On the face of it, mirror signal maneuver seems very straightforward to somebody who's been doing the job for a long time. But when it's the very first thing that you're having to do, or a controls lesson, how do you structure it? And this can be found in the books, but it's things that we can go through on the course as well. I think sometimes as well, people, when they're answering the questions, they go to their part one and they're not necessarily expecting questions on the driving test itself, or they're not expecting a question on various types of disabilities in driving, or they're not expecting a question on limit points or the effects of the dynamics of a car as it goes through a bend. These are things that will potentially be asked, but do people always know where to go? And if that question doesn't come up on that app, then they're not going to know unless they guess it well. And then if they're guessing it and getting it right, how does that help? Because it's just a guess, and they won't know whether their guess was right or wrong. They don't know which one they got right and which one they got wrong. So I think, one of the reasons behind this as well for us both is that we know that over the years, the way that people learn and gather their information about anything has changed. If you get a table from IKEA and you want to build it, most people just throw the instructions over their shoulder and have a go, thinking, well, I got one from MFI 20 years ago. How difficult can this be? And it's all in Swedish anyway. And then they start to put the table together and realize that they can't do it. The cat's now gone off with a piece of paper and they're having to use Google or whatever it might be to try and find the instructions for Eric the table that they had all the instructions for. People just try to do things and they're not prepared to take their time over it. I feel like there's a little bit of a hurriedness going on. But actually, part one, you don't need to hurry it. You've got plenty of time. And as I say to my learners, you don't need to be fast to be quick. You can learn really well, but by pacing it really well, without overwhelming yourself, without trying to cram so much in that it just becomes unfathomable to people. So we start gently. We'll start on our first session with things like road procedure, and that will be it. And we'll just focus on that as a topic and then give homework at the end of that session for people to go away and think, right, that's where I'm going to start. I'll go and learn some stuff about road procedure. And when they come back, they can share what they've learned. And then we'll move on to session two, which might incorporate traffic signs, for example, or signals. And we'll go through some of the stuff that crops up. And then they can go away and learn a little bit more about that afterwards. And then we can have a discussion about it prior to session three, and then session four, and so on. And that's the way that it's going to work. And they can pop their questions up on the socials too. We're going to enjoy the engagement with these people, I think. There's not going to be a wrong question. They're just going to be questions that are misunderstood. And we want to try and get a level of understanding back in that. We want to be the friendly pace to go. It needs to be friendly, needs to be open, and people need to be able to feel safe when they're there as well.
Absolutely. I liked your analogy about the IKEA furniture. I could see I could see it now. That's how I put things together. I I get it out of the box and I look
You're
at
not
what
selling
might
this,
fit.
Josh.
But bear with me, go with me on this one. I get it out of the box, I see what fits, I get it wrong, and I try again. Then the missus will shout at me because I've taken 2 days and it should have been a 20-minute one-man job. And then when I've realized that I can't do it, I go and get the instructions and I basically have to start again and I go through it, which is why I'm not allowed to do DIY anymore. But I done very similar with my part one and it cost me a lot of money and a lot of time. I done a few mock tests. I went and done a part one, failed. I was like, oh, I just got unlucky on that day. So a few more mock tests, back to another part one. and failed. And then for the third attempt, I went back for the instructions. I went back to the publications and I read through them. I knew some of the areas where I was weaker, so I could focus on them. But I had to go back and do all of that again. And then I went and passed on my third attempt. So it cost me two test fees that I didn't need to use. It cost me, off the top of my head, probably 2 months of time, when that 2 months could have been spent learning and understanding the content, or at least half of that, maybe 4 weeks, maybe doing a Zoom session a week for 4 weeks before going doing my part one and then getting it done first time. So I think you're absolutely right. That's how I do things. And now I'm aware of it, I do take more care and more preparation. And we can save people that time and that money and give you the instructions and help you go through the instructions and help you build and develop your own knowledge and areas where you can improve. So I think it's a very similar story with my part one
It is
and me
very
trying to
similar.
build things.
Exactly, it is. But we also want to create this little network of new starters as well, don't we? So people know that they'll start to meet people in a similar situation to themselves. So they'll be able to ask one another. And that's a nice thing to do as well. So do I put this leg on the table first, or do I put this leg on the table first? Which is the right way to do it? And if they can't come to us or they can't get hold of us for whatever reason, then they'll have a network of people that they can actually go to as well, people that have been there, seen it, and done it. And it's going to be fun for them. It's going to be enjoyable for them. But interestingly, you're sort of like saying passing it first time. That is our goal. And I think I mentioned when we last spoke about the part one, how much the pass rate has dropped since 2008 from over 60% to under 40% now. So there's been a massive drop off in the pass rate for part one. And one of the things that we would like our PDIs to do is to share with us their experiences and their results, not their names, just so that we know how well people are doing, so that we can actually demonstrate, maybe to the DVSA at some point, that this is a good way of learning to get these PDIs through at the first attempt. We firmly believe that it is. And yeah, it will be great. And I'm confident that people will be passing more first time if they use this method. Why would they
I'm
not?
looking, I'm looking forward to it. And you're right. It's I think it's going to put people in a really strong position for their first attempt at part one. And hopefully, if you're listening to this, it will either give you somewhere to turn if you're at the early stages, or if you know people that are considering becoming a driving instructor, or they're at the early stage and they're preparing for a part one. Get them to get in touch and we'll see how we can help those people. But you've briefly mentioned it a minute ago, Craig, and that was the structure of how it's going to be. And I've said that it's going to be um, Zoom sessions over 4 weeks. So do you want to talk a little bit about what people can expect from the course?
Yeah, so once they've booked onto the course, they'll get a link to the Zoom session, probably on the day of the session itself. The session is scheduled to last 2 hours. And it will be, as I said, interactive. So people should come along with a view to taking part. We want them to take part. But just by that, it doesn't mean that everybody has to. If you're somebody who just likes to listen, then that's okay too. But the more you get involved, the more we think you're going to learn. So the sessions will run over a 4-week period. There'll be 4 different sessions covering road procedure for session 1. Then we'll be moving on to traffic signs, signals, car control, and mechanical knowledge for session 2. Session 3 will be all about the driving test, disabilities, and the law. And finally, session 4 about publications and instructional technique. Now, all these 4 sessions are geared around the 4 different sections of the theory test. So in the theory test, you're expected to score, ideally, 25 out of 25 in each of these sections, but certainly above 20 in each of these sections. So it's in these sections we've looked at where people have struggled in the past or have misunderstood something or maybe have not seen it on their apps. And we've focused on those particular areas which we know that people find challenging. And we're going to answer other questions related to those sections as well throughout the particular session that you're on. We're not sure on numbers yet for courses, but it's somewhere between maybe 10 and 15 people per session. So there'll be a good crowd and lots of opportunity for some good banter and some good learning to take place as well.
So that's the courses that we will be running. As I mentioned, there's also going to be a podcast running. Initially, there's going to be a lot of episodes that go out so that we can help people that need it and direct and guide them. And then we're looking at a monthly episode. I think we've got some ideas of how that might look in the future, but I think that's one that, again, in time, will develop as we go. But there's going to be episodes going out, podcast episodes going out with it. We'll be running the courses, and you'll be able to find us on our socials because we've spoke about it and we've not mentioned the name yet. And we've been very clever with the name again. It's called the... Go on, do you want to go for it, Craig?
I've got to try and remember it. ADI Part 1 podcast.
Or app for short.
APP, because it's the only app you'll need.
There we go. Look at that. We know what we're doing, don't we?
Yeah, we'll sort of do. Yeah, you caught me by surprise then. I needed to think about that for a second.
Maybe we'll edit that bit out. I don't think we will. That takes
No,
too
leave
much
it
time.
in, leave it in. So we'll just refresh. Take 2. It's the ADI Part 1 podcast, but it's also the ADI Part 1 preparation as well, isn't it? So we've used the 3 letters app because we feel that this could be the only app that you'll need. We're not decrying the digital apps at all. They're a really good resource and it's a place where you can go afterwards and test the knowledge that you've gained. But really, we think that the apps should be used for assessing your knowledge, not necessarily for gaining knowledge. There's a lot to be said for being a quality instructor, and quality comes from knowledge sometimes, and that knowledge becomes power and helps a huge amount. But we want you to have fun along the way. We want to take this boringness, this hurdle away and make it part and parcel of the entire process. Make it as fun as part 2, make it as fun as part 3.
Absolutely. So those of you that have give this episode a listen or a watch, if you could head to the ADI Part 1 podcast Facebook page, and that will be going live around the time of this episode going out. We'll have the Facebook page and the Facebook group ready to go. The podcast episodes that myself and Craig have done will be available on a separate YouTube channel, so you can also head over there. But I would really appreciate it if you could head to the socials, give it a like, give it a share, subscribe to the channel, and drop us a comment as well. Give us a comment, send us a message, let us know your thoughts. It'll be interesting to get some feedback from everyone. And yeah, we will see where it goes. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. And I think we can really help some people at the very early stage of becoming a driving instructor.
On the give us a comment mention that you just did, it'd be useful if people have got anything specific that they feel would be beneficial to them to be included within the sessions that we run. I don't want to be so blasé as to think we've covered everything, because I'm sure that we haven't. But if there's anything specific that people feel would be interesting to them, just pop it in the comments below, and we can look at those. And if we're not covering it and we can fit it in the time that we've got, then that's great. Or if we feel that we need to run a 5th session because there's so many questions that come up, then we might do that as well. We might just do ad hoc monthly sessions as well, where we can go through the Q&A of some of these questions that people have, the burning questions. So we want to be able to answer as much as we can, but in the most interactive way possible. We want you to be the stars of the show in a way, and that, we'll be guided very much by the things that you need, and we'll supply hopefully as much as we possibly can back to you. That's our plan. It's a good plan, Josh.
Who came up with that?
We did.
There we go. Well, Craig, thank you very much for your time tonight, and everyone that's give it a watch or a listen. Yeah, let us know what your thoughts are, and I look forward to hearing from everyone. But Craig, thank you.
You're welcome.